We're going to look at access to the internet at home, those who do, those who don't. And then what we think is even more important is, despite access, participation in the digital economy. And we'll talk about how we frame that, and then some of the barriers. And one of the reasons we did this is obviously a hugely important issue for us at Ipsos, but also for a lot of our clients in terms of what they're trying to do. Very quickly, the methodology was some work we did in October. It was large, in a world where we do about 95% of our work online. Was a large telephone survey, a mix of landline and cell phone. We surveyed 1,000 people who had home internet subscriptions, and 250 who were non-home internet subscribers, which is about 9% of the population. So we, other studies have been done where they've done samples of 100. Pew does a rolling study in the US of all their telephone pieces where they only ask 1 or 2 questions, but anybody who falls in that, I think in the US it's a little bit higher than that, in that 10-12% who don't have home internet access, they ask them a handful of questions. But we wanted to do it all in one shot and compare. And we want it to be robust enough so really understand the 250 was one of the initial goals. I won't go into the objectives because I pulled up a couple of quotes that I think covered off better. These are from the Davos discussions around the digital economy, and the first one's from Eric Schmidt, the chairman of Google. And I won't read it, you can read it, but in a sense he says we're on the cusp of something that's almost overwhelmingly good in terms of the digital economy. The second is from Sheryl Sandberg. And she talked about, this is from a panel discussion that they were on, the increased economic opportunity, increased equality, and these huge opportunities. So in a sense, our goals, if you look back to that, were to look and say, are we on the cusp in Canada? And if we are, what steps can be taken to realize that economic opportunity and the increased equality across the board? As I said, this isn't really a theoretical debate for us. It's something that we see all of our clients. Just this morning, I got an invitation to a National Health Services debate in the UK on moving more and more of their services into e-services. And they frame it like everybody else does. 86% have access, only 2% are using it to conduct health interactions with the system. And so there's a huge gap that we can close, and we think we can save £5 billion over the next decade if we can just get more people to move into that space. As you'll see here, access and participation are 2 different things. That said, when we start to look at the shrinking middle class, the split between the economic haves and have-nots, people often turn debates and say, well, if we had more people online, maybe some of the rural areas could take advantage of the economic opportunities. You look at e-government, we do a ton of work with folks like the Institute for Citizen-Centered Services and a range of government departments who are all looking at, can we, move increasingly from bricks and mortar, increasingly from telephone and online, both to improve services, but also to save money. Health literacy is a huge issue. A lot of our clients looking at moving prevention activities online, so you can, they're trying to sort of take a note from WebMD and follow along those lines. Civic engagement, voting, participation in community activities. A lot of our groups are working in volunteer and charitable spaces, and then not the least of which is making money in e-commerce. And Gord Bingham, who heads up our advertising research group, can tell you tons about how advertising moved in the digital space and everybody's there. So there are obviously huge opportunities on that side as well. So that said, it really does hit the road for us in a number of cases. And we do a little bit for all of these folks, but we've never done a deep look at sort of just participation and overall. Just to set things a little bit, this is from a study we did in August around Ipsos' 40th anniversary. And we asked a bunch of our partners and clients what they saw as some of the big trends facing the country and where they were going. And then we went back, and this is Canadians' data, we went back to the general public and said, are you seeing the same trends? And are they, do you think going forward the next 40 years they're good or bad? And one of the trends that our partners saw and Canadians saw was the increasing reliance on technology and on social media overall. And as you can see, around 4 in 10, 44% Canadians said, I've experienced this firsthand. Another 49% say they've heard about it or learned about it or seen about it. So 9 in 10 Canadians say, yes, it's clearly a trend I've seen. But then we're dead split. 53% say, I think it's mostly positive. 47% say, I think it's mostly negative going forward. And not surprisingly, that split lines up pretty much along age lines. But that gives you sort of the context overall in terms of where this is moving. So accessing the internet at home. Access is nearly universal, but for those who don't have it, the biggest barriers are relevance, cost, and usability in that order, and I'll show you some data on that in a second. What this slide shows is just a breakdown of the different types of access. So 91% of Canadians say they subscribe to the internet at home. Despite upwards of 60% who have mobile access, only 2% say they subscribe to a mobile plan, and that's all they get used for their internet access is just mobile only. Another 2% said to us, between friends, libraries, work, I get all the access I need. I don't have it at home, but I do have a source for it. And then 5% of the Canadians said, I don't access it. I don't have anything at all. So the numbers tend to be, depending, and we have questions where we ask, have you accessed it in the last month, et cetera. You get anywhere from 85 to 90 some odd percent, but we think given the size and robustness and the way we broke it out, we're pretty clear about 95% have access in some way, shape, or form, about 91% who have access home. Those who don't have access at all, tend to be lower income. If your income's under 25K, it climbs to 20%. They tend to be older at 15% if you're over 60, lower education, and they tend to be in rural and small towns. Just in terms of just some quick numbers so you can see the difference. If you have a home subscription, your average age is 46. If you don't, you're older, it's about 58. If you have a home subscription, your average income is $87,000, and if you don't, your average income is around $44,000. Now, those economic numbers in particular are skewed because the vast majority of those people are seniors and pensioners, so the income levels differ considerably. This is an open-ended question of the 250 who are non-home subscribers, so of the 9%, and we asked why they don't have subscribed to the internet. Essentially, it breaks down to 4 things. Relevance, cost, usability, and access. So half say it's relevance. I'm not interested in the internet. I've been on it. I don't find it useful. I don't need to go online. It's not part of my life. Interestingly, I'm too busy. I have no time to go on the internet. And about 30% say it's cost. Some say it's cost of the actual access and subscription. Others say my computer's too old. I'd have to upgrade my hardware. So it's not all about the actual cost of the internet, but it's the actual cost of actually having a tool to use the internet. 22% say it's a usability issue. I'm too old to learn. I just don't have the skills. 8% say it's a lack of available access. The broadband is horrible where I am. The quality isn't great. So what you can see is, the relevance is obviously key for the vast majority of those who don't subscribe. We asked a couple of questions, just general attitudes about the internet. And in this case, what we've done is we've broken it from subscribers on the left, those who have access, all the way through to those who don't use it at all. And they're big, broad attitudinal questions. The internet makes life easier. The internet is good for the economy. The internet is good for society. Not surprisingly, those people who are spending money on it and have bought computers who are on it, more likely 97, 88, 87 to say, generally the internet's positive. But those people who don't have access and never access it, you still get a majority, 60 to 56%, who say it's good for the society, good for the economy, it makes life easier. So it's pretty clear that they're voting saying it's just not for me. I understand the benefits. It's not a pox on the internet. I understand, for most of them anyway, I understand the benefits. I understand the good that come out of the internet. It just doesn't necessarily fit my lifestyle. The next section, you'll see that really clearly. Again, this is of those 250 who don't have subscriptions. We basically put forward a number of options to encourage them to sign up. And we said, if you knew these things, if these things happened, and they range from price through to security, and I'll go through them all in a second, would you be very likely, somewhat likely, or at the other end, not at all likely to subscribe to the internet? The red bar is the not at all likely. The dark blue bar on the left is those people who say they're very likely. So even on an issue of price, and now we've left it vague, we've said the price was reduced significantly, so it's not like we put dollars on it in this one and said it would be this much or a percentage. 42% say I'm still not at all likely versus 25% say I'm likely. If you had a device that required internet access, so if someone gave you a tablet or someone gave you something and suddenly you needed internet access because you had this device in your home, 47% say, I still wouldn't hook it up. It's just not for me. 14% said, yeah, I'm very likely then if did it. And first-hand experience, my mother, I don't need the internet access. I don't need it. I don't care. I don't want it. We gave her an iPad once for Christmas. She's on Facebook all the time. She's sending pictures. So she's like, no, I couldn't live without it now. So it does happen to people. But as a first blush, they're like, no, this isn't for me. In terms of quality, if access was there, 49% say no, it wouldn't make a difference. In terms of security, if everything was safe and you weren't worrying about privacy issues, 50% say it wouldn't make a difference. This carries on. In terms of if someone were to help you learn about computers and how to use the internet, fulfill your needs, 61% say still not at all likely to do it, only 9% very likely. If you're able to communicate with family or friends, 63.9. Again, my mother, I said, you could talk to your grandkids. She said, yeah, I don't want to. And then in terms of content, if there were more social and cultural content, things that were relevant to you, and then these are fairly wide open questions, obviously, 62% say I'm not at all likely. So again, what you can see is those people who aren't subscribing, they don't see necessarily a downside to it for society. They don't think it's horrible. They're just saying, I've looked, I've thought, and this is just not for me. We wanted to see if they were in any way missing out on the world. So we looked at sort of subscriptions to newspapers in print and magazines in print against the different groups. So what you can see is, not surprisingly, those people who are older, those people who don't have access, a little more likely to subscribe to newspapers in print. About the same in terms of magazines. So they're still reaching out. They're still finding ways, but not huge skews. You're not getting 70% of those who are offline saying I'm subscribing to magazines and print, and only 10 or 15 the other way. Is still relatively equal. And that's something we've seen in other areas. Those people who are online don't necessarily give up their traditional media sources. They start to move them offline a little bit more, but a lot of people haven't given up their newspaper subscription despite the fact that they're reading their newspaper on their tablet as well. We're going to shift to participation, and I think it's worth pointing out that we often frame this debate around access, and it's not. It really is about participation. And we see this in a lot of the issues we deal with. So flu shots. Everybody in the country has access to a flu shot, and then the percentages who actually take advantage of them are fairly low. Some of it's because they don't think they need them. Some of it's because of convenience. There's a range of issues. Voting. Everybody can vote, but it runs from mid-60s federally down to low 30s municipally. So yet if you ask people, should you vote? Universally, they say yes. It should be voted something we should do. Is it effective? That's a different question. But so it's really about participation. We looked at it, and our view was it's more than just economic activities. So we looked at a range of cultural and social activities as well as economic, and we call them transactional activities. And when you look at participation like access, you'll see that it's uneven. But again, it's not just a rich versus poor issue. What we did is and I'll show you the list of, I think, around 14 activities that you could do online, as we asked people about the 14 activities and how often and how much they did these activities online, and then combined it, worked back, and built an overall index of participation in the digital economy. But for our purposes, we'll look at the bar on the right, and you can see a nice arc from 11% who are very high score on a 1 to 7, they scored 6 to 7, through to 8% who are very low, and then a group in the middle who are high, moderate, low. So essentially you have on the very high level, we'll call them the super users. They're very engaged, very involved, taking full advantage. You've got a large group of about 80% of the population in the middle who fall in the high to low. And then the very low, and remember, these are people who have access to the internet, so you might want to best call them Luddites with Netflix. So they're online, but they're not doing a whole lot with it. This chart shows the transactional activities, so from banking through to booking health appointments. On the far left is those who fall in the very low category. On the far right are those who fall in the very high category. In the summary report, it's a data table, so you can actually see all the numbers. But for here, I wanted just to show how the lines climb. 59% of Canadians say they do banking online. It's upwards of 85 upwards of 95% of those who are in the very high category. And then it drops down to about 10% of those in the very low category. And it's that kind of skew you see across all of this data in terms of transactions. Conducting research on topics of interest such as health, 38%, shopping, buying books, or buying goods and service, booking things online, whether it's hotels, that kind of thing, 30%, searching for or applying for a job at 18%, taking a course, 17%. Obviously, that's not something everybody wants to do, but the opportunities are there at 17%. Interacting with the government website, which is something that everybody does have an opportunity to do and usually has at some point in the course of a year, the ability to, it's 17%. Organizing social community activities, 17%, and then booking health appointments, checking lab results, dealing with your physician online, those kind of things at 6%. But you can see the huge opportunities from the moderate over to close that gap, particularly amongst the low and the very low. There's 28% of Canadians who aren't taking advantage of it. So not only can it improve services for them, but also when you look at sort of the pressures on government and some of those things, the opportunities for cost savings and putting those into other areas are huge. This looks at the online social and cultural activities, the second part of that built into the index. Not surprisingly, because these are a lot more fun. They range from email to talking on the phone to instant messaging, listening to music. They're all a little bit higher and people are taking a little more advantage of them. But the same kind of skews, the very low and the low, much less likely to be taking advantage of them, and then you skew up to the smaller group at the very high. Email, I don't know if 84% is universal, but it's pushing the point where everybody's using email at 84%. But it's almost unanimous almost universal amongst the moderate or higher. Reading, watching, listening to the news at 2/3. Social media, Facebook, Twitter, 2/3. Listening to music, 56%. Instant messaging, 43%. Blogging, posting content, 24%. Telephone, video, Skype calls at 21%. This is just static, so this is where we are today, but we've been tracking for the last 5 years, 6 years, participation in the social political space online, and it has doubled from the 2011 election through to the last election. So, there's been twice as many Canadians join online. We know that more people are online blogging. We know that all of the trends are increasing, and in particularly people who are looking at other user-generated content, so not content from the big broadcasters or from sort of businesses, but from their peers and that kind of thing. So it is a growth area, but you can still see here, for purpose of this, huge gaps between the very low, the moderate, through to the very high, so not taking full advantage of it. We didn't run the index at all based on the amount of time they're on or the duration they're on, but it does line up, as you can see, almost perfectly. This is weekly use of the internet by the index. Overall, those who are on less than 5 hours a week is 32%. Amongst the very low, it's 81%. Those who are 20 hours or more, it's 19%. Amongst the very high, it's 43%. So you can see that as people move up, not only are they taking advantage of individual activities, but they're spending more time on it as well. There's a much more detailed slide in the summary report of all the demographics of the index by the groups, but I wanted to put this up, just a condensed version of it, to show similar to those who have access and those who do not have access, those who are very low tend to be older, lower educated, and be in rural and remote areas. Those who are very high tend to be younger, better educated, and live in cities. But the interesting group for me in the middle was, if you look at the income spread between the low and the high, it's about $5,000. So income isn't driving, affordability isn't driving people to move up, right? There's opportunities here, there's education here, there's a number of issues. There is a gap at the very low and the very high. But then again, as I mentioned before, those who are very low are starting to push into seniors, fixed incomes, pensions, so there's a different skew there. So then we wanted to look at the barriers to increased participation. And we're going to start with just general attitudes. We wanted to look and see, those overall attitudes. Remember the broad ones we talked about. Is it good for the economy, society? Does it make life easier? Against the index. And what you can see is, there is a skew. Those who are very high, it's almost unanimous. 100% say it makes life easier, 99% good for the economy, good for society. But there's pretty significant majorities of those who are barely using the internet. 81% say it makes life easier, makes things easier. 70 and 67% say good for society, good for the economy. So overall, like those who subscribe and those who don't subscribe, they generally say, even if I'm not using it, it is a good thing for society, a good thing for Canada. we wanted to look at the barriers, and one of the things that we do is we look at, we use a behavioral economics model when we're trying to get people to take flu shots, donate blood, those kind of things. And it essentially breaks down into, you need capability, opportunity, and to be motivated in order to act or change or take on a different behavior. So we cast that in here, and a couple of things came up when we looked at sort of, participation. First off, 54% of the population, these are people who have access, said, there's nothing stopping me. I'm actually taking full advantage of the internet. And then remember, go back to that slide that showed, the number of people at the low, very low, and the moderate who aren't taking advantage of it. There's a huge gap there. 12% said it was an opportunity issue. And then the opportunity, we drilled down a little further to say, well, if it's opportunity such as access, what is it really? And 8% said it was affordability or cost. 3% say it was social. It's an opportunity. My friends aren't doing it. There's no peers pushing me, so I just don't have that pressure to do it. 16% said it was more about capability. Almost all of them said it was knowledge. I don't have the understanding. I'm not sure what to do. I'm not sure how to do it. And 17% said it was motivation. About 9% said it was reflexive. I've looked, I've seen, I've played with the internet, and it's just not for me. And then the rest said it's pretty automatic. I'm pretty sure from everything I've heard, I don't want to play on the internet. So you can see how it breaks down. And again, for me, the 54% is amongst the most interesting findings. So this looks at those four issues, opportunity, capability, motivation, and those who say, none of those matter to me because I'm taking full advantage of the internet. From the low group over, more than 40% and who say, none of those are issues for me because I'm already taking full advantage of the internet. So the perception out there that, and my mom would fit in this category, I have Facebook, I've been on eBay, I can email. I think I'm taking full advantage of the internet. Not looking at health services, not looking at commerce, not looking at opportunities to engage in the community, not looking at any of those things. Even amongst those who are very low, a little over 20% say, I think I'm taking full advantage of the internet. So there's a bit of myth busting, I think, that has to happen around the opportunities and what is out there around the internet. But interestingly, among the very low, the number one issue is motivation, followed by capability, and then I'm good because I'm taking advantage of it, and then relevant. So you can see some of the skews. Again, in the summary report, this is a data table, so you can actually see the numbers as opposed to the line graphs. This is the same set of questions run against subscribers and non-subscribers. I'll just note the subscribe to mobile only, because it's 2%, it's a very low base at 41. So take these numbers with at least the small ones with a bit of a grain of salt. But at either end, those who don't use the internet at all and those who subscribe to broadband, obviously if they subscribe to broadband, they're saying, pretty sure I'm taking full advantage of it. Interestingly, the subscribe to mobile only, the 2%, predominantly younger, who don't have a hard phone, don't have a home internet access, they're doing everything through their phone, they probably are taking full advantage of the internet, but they're doing it through their smartphone. And then again, if you look at those who don't subscribe at all, again, the number one reason for not subscribing or for not taking advantage is motivation. I just don't see it, it's not for me. So just some quick final thoughts. The issue facing Canada really isn't access. It's 95%, 91% if you look at home access. It really is participation, and about 56% of Canadians, the way we've split it, are moderate or low participation. And if you look at some of those individual issues, you can get down to, only 4 or 5% who are taking advantage of things that they could be taking advantage of. The digital divide's not driven by income. Affordability is a barrier only for a portion of the population. Relevance, motivation, understanding what's available to them are far bigger factors. If you go back to the comments at the beginning, Canada is on the cusp at 95% penetration, the opportunities there. However, I think we're a long ways to go before even all or even a majority are seeing those increased economic opportunities, and we're leveling the playing field on quality. Education, I don't need to mean formal education, but knowledge building, awareness, education are key. Knowledge, skills, relevance are the key barriers. This 54% who say I'm taking full advantage of the internet, interestingly, The internet is all pervasive and everybody thinks it's good. But at the same time, I think there needs to be, whether it's myth busting or the internet needs a bit of its own general education and awareness of what the opportunities are, because people are looking at it through a very narrow lens of what's available to them and what they can do. And then finally, other barriers include cost, privacy, access, quality. The other issue, and it's not up here, is age. Age matters. In a world where 3-year-olds can swipe the tablet and can complain that they're not connected, and 19, 20-year-olds are getting class participation marks for commenting in social media and university, those generations is not going to be a problem. Those generations are going to push governments, they're going to push business, they're going to push everybody to digitize their spaces. The question becomes, what do we do for 30-year-olds to 50-year-olds? And do we just wait for that leg to catch up and assume that we're 3 decades away from actually achieving these potentials, or do we put some efforts in today? Clearly, there's a group out there of older Canadians, of Canadians who are dead set against it, who will be almost impossible to move. But there's a large group in the middle, probably around 60%, who have started to see the benefits, who think it's good for society, who think it's good for the economy, who think it can make their life easier, who could be converted and could move up into those higher users.